Well, good morning. We're in the middle of July and our spell of very warm weather has air conditioners running full out. One more example of our dependence on electric power to keep us happy and comfortable. Our topic this morning is electric power, specifically the Marquette Board of Light and Power and some major decisions they are making. Their discussion starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, our guest this morning took over as Executive Director of the Marquette Board of Light and Power at a time when the organization was implementing some major changes. While he is new to this assignment, he is not new to the electric power business or to the Board of Light and Power. He's also no stranger to this area. Our guest this morning is Tom Carpenter. Tom, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Good morning, Don. Thanks for having me on the show.
Nice to have you with us. Let's give people a chance to get to know you. First of all, you are a Marquette County native, I believe?
I am. I was born and raised over by Ishpeming, Michigan. I graduated from Westwood High School.
Okay.
After that, I spent 4 years at Michigan Tech getting my electrical engineering degree, and I had an emphasis in power engineering when I was up there.
Okay.
After college, I spent 6 years down in Green Bay, Wisconsin, working at a nuclear power plant outside of that area along Lake Michigan.
Was that a different kind of experience, working at a nuclear plant?
It really was. It was a highly regulated industry. The goal was the same, to make power, but it was how we did that was different. So it was very different than what we have here in Marquette.
Okay. And then you came to work for the Marquette Board of Light and Power. What were your assignments here?
So when I was lucky enough to come back to the UP, which I always wanted to do, I started at the Shire Steam Plant as an electrical engineer. And over the course of the last 13 years, I had a number of different positions, with my last one prior to the executive director job being the director of generation and engineering, stationed at the Shire Steam Plant.
The Board of Light and Power went through some changes. Their former executive retired, and you came in as an interim executive director for a period of time, and the board decided you were doing well, so you got the job permanently.
I did.
Okay. You're here at a time when some real changes are going on with the Board of Light and Power. Let's talk about those and maybe help get people to understand why some of those changes were made and what they mean to the area. First of all, you opened what's called, I think, the Marquette Energy Center. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Marquette Energy Center was a project that was started about 3 years ago, and it was driven from a need to provide reliability to our customers. At the time, we had an aging coal facility with the newest unit in that building being 35 years old. It was suffering from some life cycle issues. It was prone to failures, and when it was offline, we had no generation to make sure that we could provide that power to the community.
Okay.
At the same time, the regional transmission system also needed upgrades, and they told us that we couldn't have firm capacity when we needed it to back up Shires. So from that was born the Marquette Energy Project, so that we could provide that firm power to the community.
And tell people what's there. I had a chance to tour it, but give them a chance to understand.
So what we have there is 3 reciprocating engines. It's a very, very old technology. It's based on a diesel engine, but with some very modern features built into that, so it's highly efficient and highly flexible. It's essentially a large car engine.
Okay. And there are 3 of these units?
Three of the units that we can run independently. We can start 1, 2, or 3 at a time as needed to provide that power.
And their form of energy is natural gas?
We can burn both natural gas as the primary fuel. That's the most efficient way to do it. And we can also burn fuel oil as a backup in a time of a crisis on the natural gas line.
Okay. And do you have adequate supplies of natural gas available?
We do. We're fed from a regional pipeline that's run from the middle of the country up to Upper Michigan, and we have the availability to run mostly what we need on that at any given time, unless they are having some type of an emergency.
Okay.
And in that case, we have the fuel oil to back up.
Okay. You have a very large fuel tank.
We do. It's 370,000 gallons.
Is there an indication that there may be some additional improvement in the natural gas situation too in the future, especially with more natural gas plants coming on board around the UP?
There is. Between the 2 providers of natural gas up here, from a pipeline perspective, SEMCO has announced some projects that they're going to try to improve the system, and Northern Natural Gas, the other pipeline provider, is also constantly upgrading the system as needed so that they can provide reliable service to all of us.
I know people are sometimes confused by megawatts and watts and those things and a lot of numbers, but what is the capacity of the Marquette Energy Center?
It's 51 megawatts.
51 megawatts.
And for a point of reference, the Marquette community and the 9 townships we serve have an average daily load of 39 megawatts.
Okay, so you have some excess capacity there.
We do, and then we also have other resources within our system.
I assume the peak demand can go up at some times, maybe in high air conditioning.
It certainly can. In the last couple of weeks have been higher than the 39 megawatts.
You also have some solar and some hydropower as well. What do they contribute to the system?
So the community solar project was a project that was born because people wanted to have solar power and they maybe didn't have the opportunity to do that in their own yards. So we built a 155 kilowatt solar garden that people can buy into.
Okay.
It's a pretty small percentage of our load. Now we also have about 4 megawatts of hydropower, which varies during the year depending on how much water is coming down the rivers.
And some of those plants go back a long time, don't they?
They do. Back to 1922, I think the first installation of what's currently running, and 1889 prior to that.
Are they primarily on the Dead River, or are they other places?
Yes, they're on the Dead River.
Okay. So the issue has become why the change from the original plan. And I did have a quote from Board Chairman Tom Tourville, who said the BLP sent a mixed message to the public when they said that Shirus had another 15 to 20 years of operation left. Actually, we should say, first of all, I guess, that right now the Shirus plant is not operating, right?
It is not. It came offline about a month ago. We burned through the rest of our coal that we had on the dock.
Okay. So when the original plan, if we can call it that, was presented to the public, the thought was that Shirus would continue to operate and these new facilities would augment that. But instead, we find the new facilities can do a better job than the Shirus plant can do. Is that a fair assessment?
It really is. So when we built the MEC, we were building it for reliability purposes. But as we were building it, we started to evaluate how we were going to dispatch all of these resources. And it became very clear very fast that we were further ahead dispatching the MEC versus Shirus because it was way more economic to run, it had way less emissions, it was way more flexible in how it operates and starts and stops. And we can take advantage of that to save costs for our customers over time.
Okay, we'll get more in detail on some of those points in just a couple of minutes. We'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Our guest this morning is Tom Carpenter. Tom is the Executive Director of the Marquette Board of Light and Power. Tom, we were talking about why things kind of changed. You brought in some consultants, I think, as well to talk about power rates and things like that. What did they determine?
So what we found after building the MEC was we were looking to see how we should dispatch the units, and we hired Burns & McDonald. They're a national level consultant that specializes in these areas. And we had them run a dispatch analysis over the course of 20 years. And they ran about 9 different scenarios with a bunch of sensitivities based on natural gas prices, coal prices, market prices, and everything else. And they found that if we dispatch the MEC when prices are high and we buy from the power grid when prices are low, we could save the community north of $100 million over the course of 20 years.
So will power rates actually be affected at some point in the future?
They certainly could be. So we run a projection every year to see what our revenue requirements will be to run the business. And as we see savings, we could pass them along to customers.
I know you also have a fuel surcharge, so that might kind of automatically take care of some of it, right?
It will. So all utilities have a way to pass excess fuel costs onto the ratepayers if there's a spike or some kind of a problem. On the flip side of that, if you have a savings, we can pass that savings through too, which we should see starting soon because we've been running the MEC more primarily.
Okay. So basically what the consultants found and what you found and the board has found in their studies is they can be much more efficient if they operate the new Marquette Energy Center instead of the Shirus plant.
We absolutely can. And that's on an ongoing running basis for every hour of the day. And the other costs that the Shirus plant would need if we were to maintain that and run that long term are a number of capital improvements because of the age of the facility. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed because of those life cycle issues.
Right. We've talked a little bit about the grid, and maybe some people aren't familiar with what the grid is all about. Really, every utility in the country is attached to a grid, and here in our area, we're mainly connected to MISO, I believe. And that would include the Marquette Board of Light and Power?
We are. They call it the world's biggest machine for a reason. Everybody's connected to it. And we have been interconnected to the MISO system since the mid-70s. And what they do on a daily basis is set a price of market power that you have the ability to buy from or sell into. And due to the nature of the MEC and its operations, we can flexibly, hour by hour, decide if we want to do that and take advantage of those prices.
So you do have opportunities to sell power back to the grid?
We do.
Which can be another factor in reducing costs, I assume.
It absolutely can be. And as an example, these last few weeks it's been quite warm. There's been a number of hours where we have done just that.
I imagine some of these larger, older utilities are operating some very old plants, high-cost plants, so the new energy center would be much more efficient.
It certainly would.
So would it be fair to say that this is kind of a change in philosophy for the Board of Light and Power then? I know originally they were very focused on self-sufficiency. I think you're still focused on being self-sufficient, but you do see these opportunities with the grid, for example, as well.
We do, yeah, and we always focus on self-sufficiency when it's in our best interest. But now that we have the flexible machines that we have, when we see an opportunity that's to our advantage, we take it. And it doesn't take away from the ability to provide everything that we can for ourselves. We can still do that if we need to.
And you've been able to make these changes, I understand, without really laying off any personnel, is that correct?
That's correct. We have a number of people that worked at the Shire Steam Plant, and now they're working at the Marquette Energy Center. And beyond that, we've always taken care of a number of substations and hydro plants, our combustion turbine, daily dispatch, 24/7 coverage. Anytime you call the BLP, these are the people you reach. So they have plenty of work to do, and we'll continue to stay busy.
I think the Marquette Board of Light and Power has an excellent reputation as far as reliability. Has that been affected in any way?
Not at all. We've actually had a reliability report presented at our board meeting last night, and we average less than one outage per customer per year with a 99.97% availability of power to everybody in the area.
And that affects, that's affected certainly by the generating and the distribution, especially distribution, I imagine.
Both, yes,
Yeah.
and a lot of the outages, of course, are distribution related when we have a storm.
So, I think a lot of people think, well, we've got this big old power plant down there. It does have some value. Can't we just keep that as a backup? But that's not as easy as it sounds, right?
It's not. So our original plan was to do just that, and we were going to look at what it would take as an investment to keep that facility viable for a long period of time. And what we found was that it was going to be quite expensive. We would need heating boilers, heat the facility, and a number of other things. So now we're taking a different approach, and we're going to explore that still, but also other options, which could include taking the facility down.
Okay, we'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. We'll be back with more on this morning's Ryan Report after we take one more break. Again, our guest this morning is Tom Carpenter. Tom, we were just beginning to explore the fact that maintaining the Shires plant as a standby in the backup has some real questions about it because of the cost that would be involved. For example, now the plant kind of heats itself, doesn't it, with the generators, not now, but when it was operating, pretty much heats itself with the equipment in the building.
Under a normal operation, it would be kind of self-heating.
Okay. So you would have to, number one, put in a large boiler to heat a very large building.
We really would, and there's no insulation in the building. We don't currently have a boiler to heat it besides the generators when they're running. And that boiler itself would cost $900,000 to put that in.
Okay. And I think there was some issue with disposal of coal ash as well that you're facing with that plant.
There is. By October of this year, and it's our biggest environmental hurdle if we wanted to keep running, we would have to get rid of and mitigate a coal ash settling pond that we have near the dock. And we'd have to put in a new system to allow that water to settle the ash out of the lime slurry.
And of course, and I recall reading this, but for the first time in, I think it said 51 years, there's no coal on the dock, right?
There's not. It was a weird day to drive by and see that it was empty.
And so you would have to have a supply of coal on hand because you can't just run out and buy coal in the quantities you need on the spur of the moment.
That's right. It's quite a process. We have to order it well in advance and get a ship sent to Marquette and unloaded on the dock, and it's quite expensive.
So at some point, someone, and it's the Board of Light and Power, will have to make a decision as to what they do with the Shiras plant. So you're looking at those options now?
We are. We're exploring everything we just talked about. We're still going to explore that and see what it truly would cost. And we're also going to explore everything up to and including demoing the facility and removing it. And as we find some of these answers, we'll go to the board and see what direction we want to go.
And I realize you don't have an answer, but based on what's happened in some other places, tearing down a plant of that magnitude may not be as ominous as it sounds.
It's not terrible for the people who do it. It would be a big job for any of us, for sure. But it's a process and a project, and sometimes it can take probably a year to physically remove them.
And there can be some salvage ability which would contribute to the cost of that as well sometimes.
There certainly is. There's a lot of metals and different things you can sell from the facility.
I know there's also an issue, and you don't have answers yet, but the Board of Light and Power does pay payment in lieu of taxes to the city, and that's something that's going to have to be negotiated as time goes on because of the change in the system.
Yeah, it will. So we pay a PILT to the city based on asset value, but there are a number of ways that other municipal power companies throughout the country really calculate that value, and we can work with the city to come to an agreement on that.
Okay. You're having an issue now with noise, and it mainly deals with some people who live very close to the plant. I know you've put a lot into studying the issue. Where do you stand on that problem?
So when we started the project, we hired sound engineers, a sound company, to come in and evaluate what would need to be done to make sure that the neighbors are happy and not bothered by any of the noise. They did that. We spent a lot of extra money, north of $200,000, putting in a number of features to keep it quiet, and we built the facility. And now we found that there still is some noise emanating from the building itself that's become kind of a nuisance to some people. So we hired the original engine manufacturer along with the original building designer and the original sound engineers to come in and re-evaluate that for us and propose some solutions, hopefully to help mitigate that sound.
And one of those companies, or one, has come forward with a plan, but you're still evaluating that?
We are. So the Wärtsilä, the original engine manufacturers, have proposed some boxes, let's call them, that we could put in the facility to help absorb that noise. And what we want to do now is make sure that any time and money that we spend doing this is really effective. So we've brought that to the original building designers, and we're having them evaluate that to make sure that if we do it, it works, because we want to be certain that what we do is going to be successful.
Do you expect to be able to hear from them sometime fairly soon?
Next couple of weeks,
Okay.
they're going to get back to me.
Okay. A couple of other things. Is the Board of Light and Power meeting the requirements for renewable power? I know that's an issue for many utilities today.
We are. We're mandated by the state to meet a certain percentage of renewables. We generate a good portion of that with our own hydro facilities and now the community solar project. And then when we're short, we can buy credits from the system like others do from other renewable projects.
We have some other major developments going on with the Wisconsin Energy Corporation. Will that help the system, do you believe?
I do. So anytime you put a new power plant on the system anywhere in the area, it's going to be a benefit because you're putting something on that's more reliable, more robust, and hopefully more economic to run.
And of course, the closing of the Presque Isle power plant at some point will be in the opposite direction, I guess, as far as availability.
In some sense, yes, but the Presque Isle plant likely suffers from the same issues that Shiras suffered from, where it's an aging facility and it's becoming more and more prone to failures and shutdowns.
We've pretty much exhausted our time. Anything you want to add to our conversation today?
I think we've covered it all.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Don.
Okay. We'll be back with some other thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. Well, you've heard me before on the subject of how things have changed during my lifetime. So many things just aren't like they used to be. We can't cover them all this morning, so I've put together a top 10 list that provides some reminders, at least for me, of how things used to be 60 years ago. And I know I'm older than 60, but I had to draw the line somewhere. So here we go. Number 10. When was the last time you talked to a telephone operator? The women that used to say, "Number, please." Is there such a thing anymore? Number 9. 60 years ago, the only thing like the internet was a combination of the Encyclopedia Britannica and Playboy magazine. Number 8. 2-year-old Steve Asplin surprised his parents when he started reading the news to them at the evening dinner table. Number 7, to friend someone, you actually had to meet them face to face. Number 6, if anyone in Upper Michigan wanted to watch television, they had one choice, WLUC TV 6. Number 5, 60 years is so long ago that some of the young reporters here at TV 6 thought that Chubby Checker was the name of a cab company for overweight people. Number 4, if you wanted to show friends cute photos of your kids, your dog, or what you had for dinner last night, you actually had to carry pictures in your pocket. Number 3, 5-year-old Carl Bonack was writing his first book called Why Dew Points Are Important. Number 2, buying products from a retailer out of town meant placing a long-distance call or mailing a form to a company like Sears or Montgomery Ward. Amazon was just a very large river in South America. And the number one reason we know that 60 years is a long time and everything changes, 60 years ago, try as you might, you could not take a picture with your telephone. I'll be back in a minute. Before we wrap it up this morning, I want to let you know that we will not be here next week. NBC will be covering the British Open Golf Tournament, and that will include coverage during the time when we are usually here. I do want to remind you again that if you miss the show, you can always find it on uppermichigansource.com. Today's show will be available starting at about noon tomorrow. Thanks to Tom Carpenter for being with us this morning to give us some insights into the major decisions under consideration by the Marquette Board of Light and Power. And thank you for joining us. Let's get together again 2 weeks from today. Have a good Sunday.